Tonight, as you settle in and prepare for rest, you are about to step into a journey unlike any other. Not across oceans or continents, but into the heart of wisdom that has guided countless souls for more than 2,500 years. The Buddha once taught that the restless and uncertain mind can find peace when it begins to see life not as chaos, but as a tapestry of meaning. This is not just a teaching to be heard, it is an experience to be felt. As your breathing slows and your body softens into stillness, allow yourself to be carried into a space where every moment, even the painful ones, reveals its hidden purpose. Think of how many nights you've laid awake, replaying old mistakes, questioning why life has unfolded the way it has. Sometimes the silence of the night is not comforting. It becomes loud, filled with thoughts that refuse to rest. What if I told you those moments were not wasted? That even your long hours of overthinking, the endless what-ifs, the silent worries that seemed to steal your peace, were themselves seeds in the soil of your journey. In Buddhism, nothing arises without conditions. Every thought, every choice, every breath is part of an interconnected pattern shaping who you are and who you will become. Tonight, you are invited to rest not in uncertainty, but in trust that there is meaning, even when you cannot yet see it. The Buddha described existence as a chain of causes and conditions, each link bound to another in an endless flow. To see this truth is to release the illusion of randomness. Your joy did not appear by accident, nor did your suffering. Both arrived because of causes, both shaping you in ways that only time reveals. And so instead of asking, "Why me?" you are invited tonight to breathe into a new question. What is this teaching me? If these conversations speak to something real in you, something grounded in truth, philosophy, and inner growth, consider subscribing. It's a small gesture, but it helps us reach more minds like yours, and it quietly signals that you are walking this path with intention. Have you ever noticed how suffering often arrives like an uninvited guest, sudden, heavy, disruptive? A relationship ending without warning. A dream collapsing just as you reached for it. A loved one's absence cuts deeper than you thought you could endure. These questions can weigh on the heart. Why do good people suffer, while those who act carelessly seem to prosper? The Buddha did not ignore these questions. He leaned into them, teaching that the answers are not found in despair, but in understanding. He said that all things, every joy, every pain, every change, arise from causes and conditions. Nothing is random, nothing is wasted, nothing happens without meaning. Breathe slowly now and imagine yourself waking at dawn in a quiet monastery, high in the mountains. The air is crisp, touched with pine and faint incense. Mist moves through the trees like a living breath, and the earth beneath your feet feels cool, grounding you. A monk sits before you, his presence calm yet strong, as if he has carried both storms and sunlight within his heart. His robe is simple, his posture unshaken. He does not offer you easy comfort. Instead, he offers a question, spoken slowly, as though it carries the weight of centuries. What if I told you that nothing in your life has ever been meaningless? The mistakes, the heartbreaks, the losses, they are not punishments, they are not accidents, they are seeds. Seeds planted in the soil of your life, waiting to grow into wisdom. Some seeds sprout quickly, others take years buried beneath the surface before the season comes. But nothing has been wasted. The Buddha once said, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment." When you pause to look back, you may notice how even the hardest moments in your past shaped your present. A failure that forced you to change direction, a loss that deepened your compassion, a disappointment that created space for something new. At the time, they seemed unbearable, almost unfair. Yet looking closely, you see how each moment was part of a pattern you could not yet recognize. Think of a river flowing down a mountainside. The water never looks the same, never rests in one place, and yet it always moves in harmony with gravity, earth and time. Your life, too, is like that river. Some days it rushes forward with unstoppable energy. Other days it trickles, almost disappearing between stones. But every bend, every rock, every current has its reason. The Buddha called this dependent origination, the truth that nothing exists on its own. Every experience is shaped by countless conditions, just as every drop of water is shaped by the riverbed beneath it. The monk before you lifts his gaze toward the horizon, where the first rays of sun spread gold across the mist. He reminds you that karma is not a system of punishment or reward, as it is often misunderstood. It is simply the natural law of cause and effect. Drop a pebble into still water, and ripples spread outward. Sometimes they reach the shore quickly. Sometimes they travel far before returning. Your actions too send ripples into the world. Some consequences appear instantly, while others take years or even lifetimes to unfold. But nothing disappears. Nothing is ever without effect. Perhaps this is why life feels so mysterious. We see only fragments of the web of causes. We feel pain without always knowing its root. We experience joy without always understanding what brought it. The monk's voice softens as he says, "Your task is not to control the ripples, but to plant seeds wisely." These words free you from fear. If you helped create your present through past choices, you can also create a new future through the choices you make today. You realize that this truth is not a burden, but an invitation. You are not helpless in the face of life, you are a co-creator with it. The morning light deepens, spilling into the monastery courtyard, and suddenly you feel the weight of your own story, the rejections, the betrayals, the moments when life seemed cruel, they return to mind. But instead of cutting into you as before, they appear as teachers. Like stones smoothed by the river's current, your rough edges have been shaped by time and friction. You remember the words of Marcus Aurelius, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Even the obstacles have been guiding you forward. Now, imagine the monk serving you a simple meal, just rice, vegetables, and tea. At first, it feels ordinary, almost too plain. But when he invites you to look deeper, you begin to notice the hidden story in each bite. The sun that nourished the seed, the rain that fell from clouds thousands of miles away, the farmer's hands that tended the crop, the countless unseen beings who played a part in bringing this food to your bowl. Suddenly, what felt simple becomes extraordinary. This is mindfulness, seeing that everything, even the smallest detail, is the result of countless causes. The Buddha taught, if we could see the miracle of a single flower clearly, our whole life would change. And here, in this humble meal, you begin to see that truth. Nothing is ordinary. Every detail carries meaning. Every moment is connected to the next in an unbroken thread of causes and conditions. As the day stretches on in the monastery, you realize something profound. All your life, you have been searching for answers in the wrong place. You thought the question was, why me? But the real question is, what is this teaching me? And with that shift, even suffering begins to feel lighter. It is no longer a punishment to endure, but a lesson to receive. The monk rises, his steps slow and steady across the stone floor. His eyes rest on you with quiet compassion, and his words linger in your heart. Everything happens for a reason. Not because the universe wishes to punish or reward you, but because life is a web of causes and conditions, each moment shaping the next. Trust this, and you will no longer see yourself as a victim of chance, but as a participant in the great unfolding of life. The monk's words linger in your heart like an echo in the mountains. Everything happens for a reason. Yet as you sit quietly in the courtyard, you can feel your own doubt rising. You remember moments when life felt unbearably unfair, times when you gave kindness and received silence in return, times when you tried your best, only to fail, times when you loved deeply, only to be left behind. Your eyes fall to the ground, to the cracks in the stone pathway beneath you, and you whisper to yourself, But why does it hurt so much? If everything has meaning, why is the lesson wrapped in so much pain? The monk seems to hear the unspoken question in your silence. He walks slowly toward a nearby pond. Its surface is perfectly still, reflecting the blue of the sky. From his robe he lifts a small stone and lets it fall into the water. Ripples spread outward in widening circles, soft and steady. Karma works the same way, he says. Some ripples are seen quickly, others take time. Some reach the shore within moments, others travel across seasons or across lifetimes. But nothing is lost. No action disappears. Every cause has an effect, and every effect finds its cause. You watch the circles fade into the stillness again, and in that fading, you understand something you had long missed. Suffering is not a punishment, nor is joy a reward. They are simply the unfolding of seeds planted long ago. The monk continues, his voice almost like the breeze through the trees. Do not mistake delay for absence. Just because you do not see the fruit yet does not mean the seed will not grow. Every word, every thought, every action plants something. The only question is what kind of garden you are tending. These words remind you of the Buddha's teaching. Do not overlook small misdeeds, thinking they are harmless. Even drops of water, when collected, will fill a large jar. And the same is true for goodness. Small acts of kindness, small choices toward compassion, all gather into something greater than you can imagine. As you rise and walk with the monk through the monastery garden, you notice how carefully each tree has been shaped. A gardener tends to a bonsai tree that has been growing for decades, trimming, guiding, shaping with patience. The monk places a pair of scissors in your hand and points to a branch. Cut here, he says softly. Your hand hesitates. The tree is so delicate, so carefully shaped. What if you make a mistake? What if you ruin what has taken years to grow? Yet slowly, with trembling fingers, you cut the branch. The monk nods, smiling. Even hesitation has its lesson. Even fear has its purpose. Mistakes are not wasted. They shape you, just as much as your successes do. You realize then that your entire life has been like this bonsai tree, shaped not only by your triumphs, but also by your mistakes, by your delays, by your fears. Each one has left a mark, carving something deeper into your character. And suddenly you see nothing has been wasted. Have you ever noticed how the most difficult experiences carve the deepest wisdom into your heart? The heartbreak that once felt unbearable, but later taught you to love with greater depth. The failure that felt humiliating, but became the very force that redirected your life. The disappointment that seemed cruel, but quietly saved you from greater harm. The Buddha once said, "In the end, only three things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you." And in that teaching, you begin to understand suffering is not here to break you, it is here to shape you. Think of a stone resting in a river. At first it was sharp, jagged, rough, but the current flows over it day after day, year after year, until slowly the stone becomes smooth, polished. Not because the river was gentle, but because it was constant. Suffering works in the same way. It wears away illusions, pride, and fear. What feels like erosion is often refinement. What feels like damage may actually be the process of revealing something truer, something more resilient within you. The sun begins to set in the monastery, casting long golden light across the courtyard. Lanterns are lit, their glow soft against the deepening sky. Monks walk quietly, their steps unhurried, their robes whispering against stone floors. In this atmosphere, you realize something you have long forgotten. Stillness itself can heal. You sit with them in the meditation hall, and the air becomes heavy with silence. Only your breathing remains, steady, rhythmic, alive. Thoughts rise and fall like clouds drifting across the sky. And you remember the monk's words. Your thoughts are not who you are. They are the weather passing through the sky of your mind. As the silence deepens, you begin to notice the space between your thoughts. For the first time in a long time, you feel that suffering is not endless. It has shape, it has rhythm, it comes and it goes, like everything else. The monk beside you whispers, "Peace does not come from controlling the world, it comes from understanding it." And in that moment you realize the truth. Freedom does not mean escaping difficulty. Freedom does not mean life will finally go your way. Freedom is found in how you meet each moment. It is the equanimity of mind that neither clings to joy nor resists pain. It is the balance that allows you to stand steady, even when storms arrive. The Buddha called this balance the middle way, not drowning in indulgence, not collapsing in denial, but walking the path of understanding. The night has fully arrived. Lanterns sway softly in the breeze, their light flickering against the old stone walls of the monastery. The silence is deep, yet it does not feel empty. It feels alive, as if the air itself is breathing with you. You sit quietly, your body settled, your mind softer than before, and you notice something you had overlooked all along. Peace is not something to be found tomorrow. It is already here, hidden in the present, waiting for you to notice. The monk beside you leans closer, his voice gentle. Do you see how the flame dances in the lantern? It never stays the same. Each flicker is new, and yet the light continues. Life is the same. Every moment rises and falls, yet the essence remains. The words remind you of the Buddha's teaching. All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. And suddenly you understand why clinging hurts so much. It is not that joy leaves too quickly, or that pain lingers too long. It is that you resist their nature. You want joy to stay forever. You want pain to vanish instantly. But both are guests, arriving and leaving when conditions allow. You picture a bird gliding through a wide valley. The winds shift beneath its wings, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy. But the bird does not curse the storm or demand the skies remain still. It trusts the currents, letting each one carry it further on its path. What would it mean for you to live that way, not fighting against what comes, but trusting that even the storm has a purpose? Later, as the night deepens, you follow the monk to the lotus pond at the edge of the monastery. The water is still, dark as ink, and in its quiet surface blooms the lotus flower, white, radiant, untouched by the mud from which it grew. The monk gestures toward it and says, "This is your life." The mud is not your enemy, it is your nourishment. Without struggle there is no strength. Without darkness there is no light. Without mud there is no lotus. You look at the flower and realize your suffering has not been wasted. The heartbreaks, the failures, the nights you thought you would never endure, they were not detours. They were the soil from which your growth would bloom. The lotus is not pure in spite of the mud, it is pure because of it. The Buddha once said, just as a candle cannot burn without fire, men cannot live without a spiritual life. And in this moment, you see clearly what that means. Without challenges, the spirit does not awaken. Without difficulty, the heart does not deepen. It is through the mud of life that wisdom is born. The monk bends down, touching the water's surface, and ripples move outward once again. Do not fear the mud, he whispers. Do not despise your struggles. They are shaping you, preparing you, guiding you toward awakening. Trust the process even when it hurts. As you walk back toward the meditation hall, the stars are bright above you, scattered across the night sky like endless lanterns. Each one shines because of countless conditions. The birth of galaxies, the burning of gas, the vastness of space. Nothing exists alone. And you remember again, everything has its reason. The monk looks upward with you and smiles. You are like these stars. Even in darkness you shine. Even in silence, your light reaches further than you realize. And as the night grows quiet once more, you feel something shift inside you. Not the end of pain, not the erasure of questions, but trust. Trust that the mud will give rise to the lotus. Trust that the river will always find its way. Trust that even when you cannot see the meaning, it is still unfolding. The hall is silent again, filled only with the soft rhythm of breath. You close your eyes and the monk's words echo faintly. Do not fear the mud. For a moment you think about all the mud in your own life, the heaviness of regrets, the sting of losses, the sharp edges of disappointment. And yet, as the silence deepens, something remarkable happens. The weight feels less like a chain and more like a teacher. The Buddha once said, "In the end, only three things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you." You hear those words not as a command, but as an invitation. Letting go does not mean abandoning what mattered. It means loosening your grip on what no longer serves you. You think back to the times you held on tightly, to a relationship that had ended, to a dream that no longer fit the person you were becoming, to anger that burned longer than it should have. Holding on felt like control, but in truth, it was resistance. It was standing in the river, demanding the current stop. And the river, patient and strong, kept flowing anyway. The monk speaks softly. When you let go, you are not losing. You are making space. Space for new beginnings, space for peace, space for freedom. His voice is calm, but it cuts through like light breaking a storm. You picture a hand clutching a rope. The tighter it pulls, the deeper the burn. And yet the moment the hand releases, the pain begins to heal. Letting go is not a weakness. It is wisdom. It is the recognition that life moves whether you resist it or not, and peace is found not in clinging, but in trust. As you sit with this, the sound of a bell echoes across the monastery grounds. It is time for the evening meal. Once again, the monks gather around bowls of rice, vegetables and tea. Nothing extravagant, but everything offered with deep care. Before anyone takes a bite, they bow their heads in gratitude. Gratitude for the rain, the soil, the sun. Gratitude for the hands that grew the food, for the effort that carried it here, for the moment that allows it to be shared. You realize that gratitude is not something reserved for grand victories. It is hidden in the ordinary, waiting to be uncovered. A breath that fills your lungs, a cup of water quenching your thirst, the simple comfort of resting your body on the ground. Each one is proof that you are supported by life in ways you rarely notice. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "Walk as if you were kissing the earth with your feet." And as you hear the chant of thanks, you understand his meaning. Gratitude turns every step, every bite, every breath into a miracle. It transforms the ordinary into the sacred. After the meal, you return to the garden where lanterns glow softly against the night. The monk pauses by a bonsai tree once again, and he points to the branches shaped carefully over many years. "Balance," he says. "This is the heart of equanimity, to bend without breaking, to grow without clinging, to remain steady even as the seasons change." Equanimity does not mean becoming cold or distant. It does not mean ignoring pain or pretending joy doesn't matter. It means standing steady in the middle of both, like a tree rooted deeply in the earth. The winds may come, the storms may rage, the blossoms may fall, but the tree remains. The Buddha taught, develop a mind that is vast like the earth, where both pleasant and unpleasant can fall without shaking it. Imagine living like that, untouched by the extremes of gain and loss, success and failure, praise and blame. Not indifferent, but free. Not numb, but balanced. And suddenly you understand, peace is not found by avoiding the storm. It is found by learning to be calm within it. Equanimity is not escape, it is mastery. It is the quiet power to remain whole no matter what arrives. As you stand there, the night air cool and gentle, you feel it within you. A balance you had forgotten, a steadiness you did not know you carried. And in that balance, a truth settles deeply. Everything happens for a reason, not to punish you, not to reward you, but to guide you toward this balance, this peace, this awakening. The garden is quiet now, the lanterns glowing faintly as if they too are meditating. The monk walks slowly, each step deliberate, as though the earth itself deserves reverence. You follow in silence, and soon he stops beside a still pond. The moon reflects gently on its surface, perfect and unbroken, until the monk picks up a small stone and drops it into the water. Ripples spread outward, each ring touching the next, until they reach the farthest edge. "This," he says softly, "is karma. It is not thunder striking from the heavens, not a hidden judge keeping score, not punishment handed down by some unseen hand. It is simply cause and effect, action and consequence, ripples spreading through the vast pond of life. Sometimes the ripples return quickly, almost instantly. Sometimes they take years, even lifetimes, to travel back. But nothing is ever lost. Nothing disappears. You think of the choices you've made, some wise, some careless. A word spoken in kindness that lifted someone's spirit. A harsh sentence that cut deeper than you meant. A promise broken, a hand extended. Each one a pebble dropped into the water, each one sending ripples into the lives of others, and eventually back to your own." The monk turns to you with a gentle smile. "This is why the Buddha taught. Do not overlook small misdeeds thinking they are harmless. Even drops of water, when collected, will fill a large jar. Every action matters. Every seed will ripen when the season is right." For a moment, silence settles again, and you reflect on how little control you truly have over when those seeds will grow. You cannot force the ripples to return more quickly, nor can you stop them once they've been sent. But you can choose what kind of stones you drop into the pond. You can plant seeds of compassion instead of cruelty, patience instead of anger, wisdom instead of ignorance. Still, you cannot help but wonder, why does kindness sometimes go unanswered? Why do good deeds seem invisible while selfishness appears rewarded? The monk senses your thought and gestures toward the moonlit pond again. When you plant a seed, you do not dig it up each morning to see if it has grown. You water it, you give it sunlight, you wait. Karma is the same. The seed of goodness may rest beneath the soil for a long time, but in the right season it will bloom. You breathe deeply, letting the metaphor take root. How many times had you rushed life, demanding quick returns? How often have you doubted the value of patience, of trust, of quiet persistence? But here, in the stillness of the night, you see clearly transformation takes time. Growth cannot be forced. The monk lifts his gaze toward the sky where countless stars shine across the darkness. "Everything is connected," he says. "Every star you see is part of the same universe that holds you. The air you breathe has passed through countless lungs before yours. The water you drink once moved through clouds, rivers, and oceans. So too with your life. What you do does not end with you. It travels outward, touching others in ways you may never see. And suddenly the web of existence feels real. A kindness you offered years ago may still be moving quietly through the lives of strangers. A smile shared may have softened a heart you never knew was breaking. Even a small choice today could ripple far into the future, reaching people you will never meet. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is without meaning." As you walk back toward the monastery hall, you recall the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson. "The creation of 1,000 forests is in one acorn." You realize your life is full of acorns, moments, choices, seeds of intention. Some may grow quickly, some may take decades, but all of them hold the power to shape the landscape of your life and the lives of others in ways unseen. Inside the hall, the monks prepare for evening meditation. You join them, settling once more into silence. As your breath steadies, you think of the pond, the ripples, the seeds beneath the soil. You think of karma not as a sentence, but as a promise that nothing is ever wasted, that all things unfold when the time is right. And in that moment, a deep patience enters your heart, a patience for yourself, for your journey, for the seasons yet to come. The monk's words linger. Trust the seeds you have planted, trust the ripples you have sent. Trust that even when you cannot see it, life is working with you, not against you. The night deepens and the monastery grows still. The chants fade into silence, leaving only the soft sound of wind brushing against wooden beams. You sit quietly, your breath slow, your body relaxed, and yet your mind begins to wander again. It drifts to the past, moments you wish you could change, words you wish you had spoken, choices you wish you had avoided. Then it leaps into the future, worries of what might come, fears of what you cannot control. The monk sitting beside you opens his eyes, as though sensing your unease. He speaks softly, almost like a whisper. The past is gone. The future has not yet come. The present is all you truly have. His words echo the Buddha's timeless teaching. Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. You close your eyes, letting his words sink in. For so long you have lived as though time was your master, haunted by what has already passed, anxious about what is still to come. But here, in this moment, you begin to see that peace does not live in yesterday or tomorrow. Peace lives only now, in the steady rhythm of your breath. Still, the truth of impermanence feels heavy. How do you accept that everything you love will one day change? That joy will fade, that even the brightest days will eventually darken? The monk senses your thoughts and tells you a simple story. He speaks of a man who once received a cup from the Buddha. The man admired it, treasured it, and worried constantly that it might break. One day the Buddha asked him, "Do you see this cup as already broken?" The man was confused. The Buddha explained, "When you understand that the cup is already broken, that it will one day shatter, you can truly appreciate it while it is whole. You no longer cling, you simply enjoy it as it is, for as long as it lasts." The story feels like a quiet bell ringing within your heart. How often have you held on to people, moments, even objects, as though they should last forever? How often have you resisted change, fighting against the truth that all things rise and fall? But perhaps the secret is not to resist impermanence, but to embrace it, to see its beauty, to love without clinging, to live without fear, to cherish what is here now, knowing it will not last. The monk places a lotus flower in your hand. Its petals are soft, its fragrance delicate. "This," he says, "is impermanence." Already the flower is beginning to fade, just as all living things do. But instead of sorrow, you feel wonder. The lotus is precious not because it will last forever, but because it blooms at all. Its beauty is in its fragility, in the fleeting moment it offers. You remember the Buddha's words, "All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering." You realize now that clinging creates pain, while acceptance creates freedom. By seeing the cup as already broken, by seeing the flower as already fading, you are not robbed of joy. You are given permission to love more fully, more deeply, while you still can. As you sit with the lotus in your hand, the monk reminds you that surrender is not weakness. It is not giving up. It is releasing the illusion of control. The river flows whether you fight it or not. The seasons change whether you resist them or not. Life moves forward whether you cling to the past or fear the future. Surrender is not defeat. It is trust. Trust that the river knows its course. Trust that the seasons have their rhythm. Trust that life, in all its impermanence, carries you where you are meant to go. You breathe deeply, and for the first time in a long while, the weight begins to lift. You no longer need to hold everything together. You no longer need to force life into your design. Instead, you allow it to flow just as it always has. The monk smiles, as if he sees this surrender in your heart. "Like the lotus rising from the mud," he says, "you too will rise from your suffering, not because the mud disappears, but because you learn to grow through it." The hall grows quiet again, the lanterns flickering against the darkness. You close your eyes and let the silence hold you. Impermanence no longer feels like loss, it feels like freedom. The night deepens further and the silence in the monastery feels heavier, almost sacred. You sit, breathing gently, and a memory stirs within you, one of pain. Perhaps it was a betrayal, a heartbreak, or a loss so heavy it seemed to hollow you from the inside. You feel it rise again, like an old wound that still remembers how to ache. The monk does not look away. Instead, he meets your eyes and speaks softly. Do not run from it. Sit with it. Pain is not here to destroy you. It is here to teach you. His words remind you of something the Buddha once said. By oneself is evil done. By oneself is one defiled. By oneself is evil left undone. By oneself is one purified. Purity and impurity depend on oneself. No one can purify another. The meaning is clear. No one else can walk this path for you. No one else can learn the lessons hidden inside your suffering. You close your eyes and let the memory play out. The sharpness of the pain is still there, but beneath it, something else begins to appear. That heartbreak taught you resilience. That loss taught you compassion. That failure taught you humility. At first, these moments felt like punishments, but now you see them differently. They were not punishments. They were preparations. The monk tells you a story about a sculptor. A block of marble stood tall, untouched, until the sculptor began to strike it with his chisel. Blow after blow, piece after piece, the stone felt broken. But slowly, what emerged was not destruction but form. A figure of great beauty began to appear, one that had been hidden inside all along. The monk looks at you and says, "Your suffering is the chisel." It does not come to destroy you, it comes to reveal you. You realize then that your wounds are not scars to be ashamed of. They are proof that you have lived, proof that you have endured, proof that you have been shaped. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." And now those words feel alive in you. The very obstacles that once seemed to block your path were, in truth, the path itself. You think of the river again, smoothing stones through years of constant flow. It is not the stillness that shapes the stone. It is the friction, the resistance, the ceaseless movement of water against rock. In the same way, it is not ease that shapes you most deeply, but struggle. What once felt like erosion is, in truth, refinement. The monk leads you outside into the cool night air. Above, the sky is alive with stars, countless points of light scattered across infinite darkness. He tells you, without the night, the stars cannot shine. And suddenly you see your suffering has always been the dark sky. Your wisdom, your compassion, your strength, these are the stars that shine because of it. The Buddha once taught, "It is in the nature of things that joy arises in a person free from remorse." And you understand, your joy is deeper now because of what you've endured. Your ability to appreciate peace, to taste freedom, comes from knowing what it is like to feel trapped. The contrast is not cruelty, it is teaching. As you stand beneath the stars, you feel a shift within. Your wounds do not need to close before you can walk forward. They walk with you, but no longer as chains. They walk as teachers, as guides, as reminders that even the hardest seasons carried meaning. And now for the first time you begin to trust, not only in joy but in suffering too. Not because it is pleasant, but because it has always shaped you, refined you, and guided you closer to awakening. The night has grown quiet, almost as if the earth itself has slowed to listen. You sit in the meditation hall, your breath steady, your mind softening. For so long you believed that strength was found in control, controlling your future, controlling your emotions, even trying to control the people around you. But here, in the silence, you begin to see that real strength is not about control at all. It is about acceptance. The Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." You let these words echo inside you. How often have you searched outside yourself for peace, only to find it fleeting? A new possession, a new relationship, a new achievement, each one promised fulfillment but soon slipped through your hands. And now, sitting here, you realize why. Nothing outside of you can bring lasting peace. It is only in acceptance of what is, in surrendering to the present moment, that peace becomes real. Acceptance does not mean resignation. It does not mean giving up. It means seeing things clearly, without distortion. It means letting life be what it is instead of endlessly fighting to make it what it isn't. When sorrow arrives, acceptance whispers, "This too has a reason." When joy comes, acceptance says, "Cherish this, but do not cling." It is the middle way, the balance between holding and releasing. You close your eyes and the silence deepens. In that stillness you feel a strength you had overlooked before. Not the strength of force, but the strength of calm. Stillness has a power that movement cannot match. Like a mountain unmoved by storms, stillness gives you a foundation no wind can carry away. You realize that it is not always action that changes the world. Sometimes it is presence, the presence of a calm mind, the presence of a heart that does not resist. As this understanding grows, you remember a lotus blooming in muddy water. The mud did not prevent the flower from rising, it nourished it. Without the mud, the lotus could not exist. Your pain, too, has been the soil for your awakening. It has given roots to your compassion, petals to your wisdom. You smile softly, knowing that what once felt like darkness was always preparing you for the light. The monk's voice drifts through the hall. Letting go is the path to freedom. His words stir something deep inside you. How long have you carried the weight of old regrets, old wounds, old fears? How many nights have you replayed conversations, clung to outcomes, or wished to rewrite the past? But holding on has never given you peace. It has only bound you tighter. The Buddha taught, "You only lose what you cling to." You feel the truth of this now. To let go is not to lose, it is to free yourself. To free your heart from carrying burdens that were never meant to be carried forever. To free your mind from the endless loops of what if and if only. Letting go is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of freedom. You inhale deeply, as if drawing in courage, and exhale slowly, as if releasing years of hidden weight. With every breath, the body grows lighter. With every exhale, something old slips away. Fear, regret, disappointment. You realize you do not need to hold on so tightly. Life carries itself. The river flows without your control. The seasons turn without your command. And you too are carried always by conditions greater than you. Acceptance is no longer an idea. It is a feeling. It is the quiet strength that comes when you stop fighting life and start trusting it. Stillness is no longer emptiness. It is presence, full and alive. Letting go is no longer a loss. It is freedom, pure and vast. The monk bows his head slightly, and you sense the lesson is not in words anymore. It is in the silence itself, a silence that says, "You are already free if you choose to let yourself be." The lanterns in the monastery cast a soft glow on the stone walls, shadows flickering like whispers of forgotten stories. You sit quietly, the air still and heavy with incense. There is a thought pressing in your mind, one you have carried for years. What if life is unfair? What if all my struggles have no meaning at all? The monk seems to read your heart and smiles gently. He kneels beside a small pond, its surface like glass under the moonlight. With a single hand, he picks up a stone and drops it into the water. Ripples move outward, touching the far edges of the pond. "This," he says, "is karma." You watch the ripples spread. Some reach the shore quickly, others take longer. Some circle back, intersecting with one another, weaving patterns too complex to follow. The monk continues, "Every action, every word, every thought is a stone dropped into the great pond of life. Some effects you see immediately. Some take years. Some return when you least expect them. But none are lost." The Buddha once said, "Do not underestimate the consequences of your actions. Even a small spark can set a forest ablaze." You reflect on how many times you thought a kind word was forgotten, only to discover later that it touched someone deeply, or how a careless act created pain you never intended. Karma is not punishment, nor reward. It is simply cause and effect, unfolding across time. You realize now that much of your suffering came not from karma itself, but but from your impatience. You wanted answers now. You wanted justice now. You wanted the path revealed in its entirety, forgetting that life unfolds one step, one season, one ripple at a time. Just because you cannot see the pattern yet does not mean it isn't there. The monk's voice lowers as if speaking a secret carried through centuries. Trust the ripples. Trust that nothing is wasted. Trust that even what you cannot see is guiding you. You close your eyes, and the memory of your own life begins to ripple through your mind. A betrayal that felt unbearable, a loss that seemed senseless, a failure that cut deeply, and yet with distance, you can see how each one shaped you. The betrayal taught you to set boundaries. The loss deepened your compassion. The failure redirected your path towards something more authentic. What once felt meaningless now reveals its hidden thread. Trust, you realize, is not about knowing every answer. It is about walking even when the road is unclear. It is about believing that the same intelligence that makes flowers bloom and rivers flow is also guiding your life. Lao Tzu once wrote, "Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished." You repeat the words softly, and they feel like medicine to your restless heart. Imagine a farmer planting seeds. He does not dig them up each day to check if they are growing. He trusts the soil, the rain, the sun, and the rhythm of time. You too are being grown by forces you cannot always see. Your struggles are not signs of abandonment. They are the soil in which your roots are deepening. Your joys are not accidents. They are blossoms of seeds once planted, maybe long ago. The monk gestures to the sky where stars shimmer faintly above the mountain ridge. Even the stars, he says, shine from causes billions of years old. Do you think your life too is not guided by such vast patterns? His words settle into you like a lullaby for the soul. You understand now that trust is not weakness. Trust is strength, the courage to walk without needing certainty, the wisdom to accept that what is unseen may still be shaping your tomorrow. The night grows deeper and you breathe slowly. Trust does not erase fear, but it softens it. Trust does not remove uncertainty, but it makes it livable. You feel lighter, freer, as if something has been lifted from your chest. Perhaps for the first time you are willing to let life unfold without demanding to see the entire map. Trust is not blind. Trust is the clarity of knowing that even in the unseen, meaning is being written. That the ripples you cannot follow are still guiding you, gently, toward awakening. The morning bells echo through the valley, their sound both gentle and unshakable, pulling you from the silence of meditation into the rhythm of a new day. You rise with the monks and step into the monastery courtyard, where the air is cool and alive with the fragrance of pine. Everything feels ordinary: stone paths, wooden beams, simple robes, and yet something in you has changed. You see it all differently now. Gratitude stirs first. It is subtle, like a whisper at the edge of your mind. You feel grateful, not because life is perfect, but because you finally see how even its imperfections are part of a greater whole. You remember the Buddha's words, "Let us rise up and be thankful, for if we didn't learn a lot today, at least we learned a little." Gratitude is no longer something you practice only when things go your way. It becomes a lens through which every moment feels like a gift. You watch a monk sweeping the courtyard. His movements are steady, his face serene. He does not rush, nor does he resist the dust returning with each breeze. His task is simple, yet his heart is at peace. This is equanimity, the ability to remain balanced whether joy or sorrow, gain or loss, praise or blame appear. The Buddha taught that equanimity is the highest form of protection, because a mind that cannot be shaken is a mind that cannot be enslaved. And you begin to see how freedom arises from this balance. Freedom is not having everything you want. Freedom is not a life without struggle. Freedom is the ability to meet struggle without losing yourself. Freedom is the space between experience and reaction, where you can choose understanding over anger, compassion over bitterness, patience over despair. Imagine walking down a busy street in the city. Someone shouts at you in frustration. Once you would have carried that anger with you all day, letting it poison your peace. But now you remember. Their shout is a ripple of causes you cannot see, born of their own pain, their own struggles. You do not have to absorb it. You can let it pass, like a cloud drifting across the sky. This is not indifference. It is freedom. Or think of the moments when your plans collapse, when the job is lost, or the opportunity fades. Before, you would have fought reality, clinging to what was no longer possible. But now you see that every ending is also a beginning. Like the river, life is always moving, always flowing. You no longer demand that the current turn where you wish. It is enough to let it carry you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." The Stoic Emperor and the Buddha spoke the same truth across different lands. Freedom is born in the mind, and when the mind is free, no circumstance can truly bind you. You return to the meditation hall as the monks begin their chants. The voices rise in harmony, not demanding anything of the world, only offering reverence to its unfolding. You close your eyes and join your breath to theirs, and for the first time, you feel that life is not against you. It is with you. The hardships you feared, the changes you resisted, the wounds you carried, they were not punishments. They were teachers. They shaped you into the very person now able to sit here, breathing in peace. Gratitude fills you like sunlight. Balance steadies you like roots deep in the earth. Freedom lifts you like wings into the open sky. These are not things to chase. They are states that awaken when you stop clinging, when you trust that everything, even this moment, is happening for a reason. As twilight begins to fall over the monastery, the sky softens into shades of amber and violet. The day is ending, but inside you, something feels as if it is only beginning. You sit quietly in the meditation hall, the chants fading into silence, and you find yourself reflecting on the hardest parts of your life, the losses that once broke you, the betrayals that left you questioning your worth, the failures that felt like the end of everything. And yet here you are, you survived them. More than that, you were shaped by them. The cracks you once cursed are the very places where wisdom has entered. The Buddha said, "Pain is certain, suffering is optional." At first that teaching feels impossible. How could suffering be optional when pain cuts so deeply? But as you sit longer, you begin to see what he meant. Pain arrives when life changes. Suffering is what we create when we resist that change, clinging to what is already gone. Think of a wound. Left untended, it festers. But cleaned and cared for, it heals, leaving a scar that tells a story. Your suffering has been no different. When resisted, it became poison. But when understood, it became medicine. The monk beside you leans forward and whispers, "The fire that burns also forges." And you realize the truth. Your suffering was not only something to endure, it was a forge, shaping your strength, purifying your compassion, refining your heart. The mind recalls another teaching. As a lotus flower is born in the water, grows in the water, and rises out of the water to stand above it, unsoiled, so I was born in the world, raised in the world, and yet have overcome the world. Just as the lotus blooms out of mud, your awakening blooms out of your darkest nights. Without mud, there is no lotus. Without suffering, there is no wisdom. Psychology offers the same reflection. Carl Jung once said, "No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. The depths you've touched in sorrow have allowed your spirit to rise higher into peace. The pain you once wished to erase is the very soil of your transformation." You think back to the river, smoothing stones over years of unceasing flow. The stone does not resist the water. It does not cry out against its erosion. And yet, through the endless shaping, it becomes polished, beautiful, enduring. Could it be that your suffering has been doing the same? Quietly shaping you, making you smoother, clearer, and more true to your essence? A monk enters the hall carrying a lantern, Its flame glows against the darkness, steady and unwavering. He sets it before the Buddha's image, and you feel its warmth. Fire destroys, but it also illuminates. Fire consumes, but it also gives light. Your suffering too has been both destroyer and teacher. It burned away illusions you once clung to. It revealed truths you had avoided. And in the end, it gave light, showing you who you are when everything else is stripped away. And in that moment, you finally understand what the Buddha meant when he said, "It is in the nature of things to change." Suffering was never a punishment. It was a passage. It was life teaching you to let go of what cannot stay so that you could discover what cannot be taken from you. Your awareness, your compassion, your capacity to love, even when the world feels unkind. Now, as night deepens, you bow gently to your suffering, not as an enemy, but as a guide. It was the alchemy of your life, turning wounds into wisdom, turning endings into beginnings, turning the fragile human heart into a vessel of awakening. The night air in the monastery grows cooler, carrying with it the scent of pine and earth after a long day of reflection. You sit quietly, the lanterns flickering against the stone walls, and you begin to notice something new rising in your heart. It is soft yet powerful, gentle yet vast. It is compassion, not the kind you forced, not pity dressed as kindness, but a compassion born directly from your own suffering. The Buddha once said, "If your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete." For so long you may have judged yourself for hurting, for breaking, for not being strong enough, yet now you see that even those moments were part of your path. As you soften toward yourself, forgiveness begins to take root, and in that same breath, you feel the capacity to soften toward others. Their anger, their mistakes, their unkindness, perhaps these too have grown from wounds you cannot see. Think of a candle. When one flame lights another, its own flame is not diminished. Instead, the light multiplies. Your suffering has been the spark that lit the flame of understanding, and that flame now has the power to ignite compassion for everyone you meet. Suddenly you see the truth in the Buddha's words. Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal law. As you breathe deeply, you remember moments when others showed you compassion at your lowest points. A friend who listened without judgment, a stranger who offered kindness without reason. Those moments carried you further than you realized. And now, through your own pain, you understand how powerful such gestures can be. A kind word, a gentle look, a moment of patience. These are not small things. They are seeds of healing planted in the hearts of others, just as they were planted in yours. The monk beside you tells a story. There was once a traveller who fell into a deep pit. Others passed by, some mocking, some ignoring, until one person climbed down and sat with him. The traveller asked, "Why have you come down into the darkness?" The person replied, "Because I have been here before, and I know the way out." Your suffering, too, has given you maps of the dark places. It allows you to walk beside others with true understanding, not from pity, but from shared humanity. Compassion, you realize, is not weakness, it is strength. It is the courage to remain open when life tempts you to close. It is the wisdom to see that no one's suffering is isolated, that all beings are caught in the same web of causes and conditions. And so, when you forgive, when you extend kindness, you are not excusing harm. You are breaking the chain. You are choosing to stop the ripple of pain and replace it with peace. The hall grows quieter, your heart lighter. You see now that suffering was not only your teacher, it was your bridge. A bridge leading you to compassion for yourself, and through that, compassion for all beings. This is why the Buddha said, "As a mother would protect her only child with her life, even so, let one cultivate a boundless heart toward all beings." And with that truth, compassion blossoms fully in you, not as an effort, but as a natural flowering of the wisdom you've gained. The night has grown still, and the stars now shine like scattered jewels across the sky. You step outside the monastery hall, the cool air brushing against your skin, and for a moment, everything feels connected. The lanterns flickering in the wind, the quiet murmur of the forest, the soft rhythm of your own breath. And in that silence, you begin to understand something the Buddha taught again and again. Nothing exists alone. The food you ate earlier was not just rice, it was the rain clouds that once drifted across the sky, the farmer's effort, the warmth of the sun, the soil rich with life. That simple bowl held the entire universe. And so too with your own being. You are not just yourself. You are your ancestors, your teachers, your friends, the countless lives and conditions that shaped you. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "We are here to awaken from the illusion of our separateness." Tonight, you feel that truth as clearly as the air filling your lungs. Consider this. When a pebble falls into a pond, the ripples spread far beyond where the stone entered. So too with your actions, your words, even your thoughts. Every moment sends ripples into the lives of others, just as their actions ripple back into yours. This is why compassion matters. Because in truth, there is no other. To harm another is to harm yourself. To love another is to nourish yourself. The monk walking beside you points toward the forest. "Look at the trees," he says softly. Each one stands tall, but beneath the soil, their roots intertwine, sharing water, exchanging nutrients, even sending signals of warning and care. What appears as separate trunks is in fact one living system. Human beings are no different. We think of ourselves alone, but unseen roots bind us together. This is why the Buddha called the world Indra's net, an endless web of jewels, each reflecting the light of all the others. As you breathe in, you realize that even this breath is not yours alone. It was given by the trees, who transformed sunlight into oxygen. And the trees live because of the rain, the soil, the sun, and the stars. Everything supports everything, nothing stands apart. The Buddha said, "When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises." This is dependent origination. The great truth that life is an endless dance of causes and conditions, each one touching the next. You begin to sense that loneliness, which has followed you so often, may have been an illusion. Even in your darkest nights, you were never truly alone. The stars above you were shining. The earth beneath you was holding you. The people in your life, even those far away, were part of your story. And every being, in ways unseen, was connected to your breath, your heartbeat, your path. This understanding does not make life less mysterious, but it makes it less heavy. You no longer feel like a solitary figure fighting against the current. You see now that you are part of the current itself, moving with it, carried by it, and carrying others with you. And in that vision, compassion deepens into something boundless, something that cannot be confined to me and you, but belongs to all beings. The monk turns to you, his eyes gentle. "When you see yourself in all others and all others in yourself," he says, "how could you ever act without care?" His words land in your heart like water soaking into dry soil. And as you stand beneath the stars, you feel it clearly. Interconnectedness is not just a philosophy. It is the reality of your existence. And in this truth there is freedom. You are no longer a single thread. You are part of the whole fabric of life, woven with infinite others. And everything, joy, pain, loss, love, happens not in isolation, but within this great web of being. The night deepens, and with the stillness of the stars above you, gratitude begins to rise within your heart, not as a forced thought, not as a polite "thank you," but as something alive, something that swells when you truly see how much has been given to you. The Buddha once said, "A noble person is grateful and thankful." Gratitude, he taught, is not just an attitude, it is the natural fruit of wisdom, born when we realize how much of our lives rests on the care of others. Think of the breath you just took. It came to you freely, carried by trees, shaped by the wind, sustained by sunlight. Did you ask for it? Number. And yet, it was given. Consider the body you live in, the heart that has been beating since before you were even aware of it, the eyes that open to light, the ears that carry the song of the world. These are miracles too often overlooked, yet they are the foundation of every moment you live. And then think of the people who have touched your life. Some gave you kindness, support, and encouragement. Others challenged you, tested you, even hurt you, but in doing so, they shaped your strength. Gratitude does not mean approving of every experience, but recognizing that every experience contributed to the person you are today. The monk reminds you, even bitter medicine has its use. Even a sharp stone can sharpen the blade. You begin to see how much you have received without ever realizing it. The food on your plate, the roof over your head, the books you've read, the songs you've loved, all of them came through the labor of others, through countless conditions that converged just for you. The poet Rumi once wrote, "Wear gratitude like a cloak, and it will feed every corner of your life." Tonight, you feel the warmth of that cloak wrapping around you, soft and protective, reminding you that nothing you have is truly separate from the giving of the world. Gratitude transforms even the smallest moment into something sacred. A sip of water becomes a gift of the clouds. A flicker of laughter becomes a treasure shared between hearts. A quiet walk becomes an opportunity to touch the earth gently. Suddenly, life feels less like a burden to be endured, and more like a gift to be honored. As you stand beneath the stars, you realize gratitude is not about waiting for something grand to happen. It is about noticing what is already here. The present moment, in all its simplicity, is filled with treasures, and when you see this clearly, fear loosens its grip. Restlessness fades. Contentment begins to bloom. The monk's voice is soft as the night itself. To be grateful, he says, is to see the truth, that you are not alone, that life has always been carrying you. Gratitude is the seed of peace. His words sink deep and you understand now. Gratitude is not the end of the path, but the beginning of a new way of living, one where every breath is received as a blessing, and every act of kindness is offered as a return gift to the world. And so you close your eyes, your heart quiet but full, resting in the gentle truth that nothing has been missing, nothing has been wasted, and everything has been a gift. From gratitude, something even greater begins to rise. When the heart sees clearly how much has been given, it can no longer remain closed. It begins to overflow, not only with thankfulness but with love. A love that is not bound by possession, not limited by condition, but open, free, and vast. This is what the Buddha called metta, loving kindness. Imagine sitting quietly in the monastery garden. The lanterns flicker, the crickets sing, and the stillness feels like a gentle embrace. The monk beside you closes his eyes and whispers, "May you be happy, may you be safe, may you live with ease." At first you think he is speaking to you, but then you realize he is offering these words to the whole world. His voice, like a prayer carried by the wind, reaches beyond walls, beyond borders, beyond time itself. Loving kindness begins within. You place a hand over your heart and whisper the same words. May I be happy, may I be safe, may I live with ease. These are not selfish words. They are an acknowledgement that your own healing, your own peace, is the foundation from which you can give to others. Just as a lamp must be lit before it can share light, your heart must be cared for before it can radiate care. And then, like ripples spreading outward, you extend this wish to others. First to those you love, friends, family, teachers, those who have been kind to you. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. You can almost feel their presence as if your heart is touching theirs across distance. Then, gently, you send these wishes to those you feel neutral about, strangers you pass on the street, people whose names you will never know, yet who share the same struggles, the same longing for peace. May you be happy, may you be safe, may you live with ease. Finally, with courage, you extend this kindness even to those who have hurt you. This is not to excuse their actions, nor to erase the pain they caused. It is to free yourself from hatred, to recognize that they too are caught in suffering, that they too act from ignorance, fear, or desire. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. In this moment, you feel what the Buddha meant when he said, "Hatred never ceases by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule." Loving kindness does not erase suffering, but it transforms how you carry it. Instead of closing in on yourself, you open. Instead of tightening around anger, you soften. And with each breath, your heart becomes like the sky, spacious enough to hold storms without breaking, wide enough to carry both sunlight and shadow. As the monk concludes the meditation, he reminds you, when love expands without measure, peace follows without effort. You open your eyes and notice the night feels different. The same stars shine, the same crickets sing, but now everything seems connected, held together by the thread of compassion that stretches from your heart into the heart of the world. And in that moment you understand, loving kindness is not something you give to others alone. It is the natural flowering of gratitude, the blossoming of a heart that finally knows everything happens for a reason, and that reason is always pointing us back to love. From the gentle bloom of loving kindness, a deeper strength begins to rise. Gratitude softens the heart, kindness opens it, and then compassion gives it courage. Compassion is not pity, nor is it weakness. It is the quiet bravery of looking suffering in the eyes, your own and that of others, and choosing not to run. The Buddha taught, if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. And so, compassion begins where you are, with the wounds you carry, the sorrows you often hide. Picture yourself sitting again in the monastery garden. The lanterns flicker low, and the monk places a small candle in your hands. The flame is delicate, trembling in the evening air, yet it holds its place. This, he says, is compassion. A steady flame in the winds of life, not to destroy suffering, but to bring light into it. You think of your own pain, the regrets, the losses, the rejections that once felt unbearable. Instead of pushing them away, you imagine holding them as you would hold a child, gently, without judgment. This is compassion, not pretending you are unbroken, but allowing your tenderness to be part of your strength. And then, compassion expands outward. You see the faces of others, friends, strangers, even those who have hurt you, each one carrying hidden battles, each one longing to be free from pain. The monk whispers, compassion does not ask why they suffer. Compassion simply says, I am here with you. In that moment, you realize the greatest gift is not fixing others, but being willing to stand with them, to bear witness to their journey without turning away. Compassion requires courage, because suffering is heavy. To look at it without flinching is like standing before a storm, knowing you cannot stop the rain, but choosing to stay anyway. The Buddha once said, as a mother would protect her only child with her life, even so let one cultivate a boundless love toward all beings. This is compassion, not a fleeting feeling, but a boundless commitment to care. And something shifts when compassion takes root. Suffering no longer feels like punishment, nor like something meaningless. It becomes a bridge. Your wounds connect you to the wounds of others. Your healing becomes their healing too. What once felt like isolation becomes belonging. What once felt like a burden becomes a purpose. The monk closes his eyes and recites softly, may all beings be free from suffering. May all beings know peace. His words rise into the night air like incense, disappearing yet leaving behind a fragrance of truth. Compassion, you realize, is not the end of the path. It is the way forward. Each act of kindness, each moment of presence, each choice to remain open in the face of pain, weaves meaning into life. And with that you feel it again. Everything happens for a reason. Not so that you may be crushed by suffering, but so that through compassion you may be transformed by it. From compassion, something deeper begins to awaken. It is as if the heart, softened by kindness and strengthened by courage, now gives birth to clear vision. Wisdom does not arrive in a sudden flash, nor as a secret handed down by another. It grows slowly, like dawn creeping across the horizon, and its first lesson is simple. Suffering itself is not the enemy, it is the teacher. The Buddha said, "I teach suffering and the end of suffering." Those were his very first words after awakening. Not wealth, not power, not even happiness, but suffering and the way beyond it. Why? Because to see suffering clearly is to see the nature of life itself. To deny it is to live in illusion. To embrace it is to begin to wake up. You remember the rough stone in the river shaped smooth by years of current. That stone is wisdom. Not born perfect, but refined by the very hardships that once felt unbearable. Each cut, each scrape, each fall of water carving away what is unnecessary, until only the essence remains. Wisdom teaches you that pain is not random, it is lawful. It arises when causes ripen, and it passes when those causes dissolve. Like clouds drifting across the sky, suffering appears and disappears. What makes it linger is not the pain itself, but our clinging to it. The Buddha said, "Attachment is the root of suffering." And in those words lies the key. If we loosen our grip, even slightly, the weight begins to lift. Imagine now sitting again in the quiet monastery hall. The monk places before you an empty bowl. "This," he says, "is your mind." Then he pours in water, clear, still, reflecting light. One by one he drops pebbles into the bowl. Each pebble is a thought, a memory, a fear. The water ripples, distorts, and loses its reflection. "This," he says, "is how suffering clouds wisdom." But notice, the water itself was never destroyed. Remove the stones, let them settle, and clarity returns. Wisdom is that clarity, the ability to see life as it is without distortion, to see that joy and pain are not permanent, to see that every ending is also a beginning, to see that nothing in your life, no matter how hard, has been without meaning. You think back to your own story, the heartbreaks, the rejections, the disappointments that once felt unbearable. With wisdom, they look different now. They are not scars of punishment, but pathways of growth. They taught you patience when you wanted control. They taught you humility when pride tried to lead. They taught you compassion when judgment felt easier. Suffering became a mirror, showing you not what was wrong with life, but what was unawakened within you. The monk's voice is gentle. Do not turn away from suffering. Do not cling to it either. See it. Learn from it. Let it pass. That is wisdom. And suddenly you realize why everything happens for a reason. Not because life is scripted, but because every moment, even the painful ones, carries within it the seed of awakening. To resist is to suffer. To see clearly is to be free. From wisdom comes a stillness, like a lake untouched by wind. It is not indifference, nor apathy. It is the quiet strength of a mind that no longer fights what is, but receives it with balance. The Buddha called this upekkha, equanimity, the ability to remain steady, no matter how the winds of life may blow. Consider how much of our suffering is born not from events themselves, but from our resistance to them. We want joy to stay, and it leaves. We want pain to vanish, and it lingers. We chase, we resist, we cling. And in that endless struggle, peace slips through our fingers. Equanimity teaches a different way. It whispers, "Let things be as they are, and you will suffer less." The Buddha once said, "Just as a solid rock is not shaken by the storm, so the wise are not moved by praise or blame." Equanimity does not mean you feel nothing. It means you are not controlled by feelings. When joy arises, you welcome it without clinging. When pain arrives, you see it without despair. You become like that solid rock, weathered yet unmoved. Imagine now walking again through the monastery garden at dusk. The sky is painted with shades of orange and purple. Crickets begin to sing. A monk sits quietly by the lotus pond, eyes half closed, hands resting in his lap. A breeze stirs the water, ripples spread, then fade back into stillness. He says softly, "Life is like this pond." Disturbances come, but the water always returns to calm. Your mind too can return to calm, if you stop stirring it with endless grasping. Equanimity is not coldness, it is warmth held in balance. It allows you to care deeply without drowning in attachment. You can love fully, yet let go when the time comes. You can work hard, yet accept the outcome with grace. You can live with passion, yet bow to impermanence. Think of the lotus flower you saw earlier rising from the mud. Its beauty does not deny the mud. It is born because of it. In the same way, equanimity does not deny joy or sorrow. It embraces both, knowing that each has its place. The Buddha taught, "In the end, these things too are just passing through." And when you see this truth clearly, life stops feeling like a storm you must survive and becomes instead a river you can flow with. Now, as night deepens around the monastery, you feel the weight of the day dissolve. The voices of doubt grow quiet. The ache of clinging loosens its grip. You realize that acceptance is not giving up. It is setting yourself free. To live with equanimity is to live with freedom. When the heart learns to rest in equanimity, something even deeper becomes possible: trust. Not the blind trust that denies reality, but the kind of trust that grows when you see how every thread of your life, even the painful ones, has been woven into a greater tapestry. Trust is the soft surrender that whispers, "I do not need to see the whole path to take the next step." The Buddha once said, "Just as a candle cannot burn without fire, men cannot live without a spiritual life." Trust is the flame of that spiritual life. It is what keeps us moving even when the night feels dark. It is what reminds us that storms do not last forever, and that even in the mud, the lotus is preparing to bloom. Think of the seasons. Winter feels endless, yet beneath the frozen earth, seeds are quietly preparing for spring. Summer blazes brightly, only to fade into autumn's calm. Nothing stays. Nothing is wasted. Trust means you no longer demand the season to change on your command. You allow it to unfold, knowing it will in its time. The monk in the garden tells you a story. "Once, a farmer planted a seed," he begins. "Every day he dug in the soil, looking for growth. But the seed withered, never given time to take root. Another farmer planted the same seed, but simply watered it and trusted the sun. In time, the sprout broke through, then grew tall, then bore fruit." Trust does not mean inaction. It means giving life the space to ripen at its own pace. You recall the river once more, flowing endlessly down the mountain. It does not rush to meet the sea, nor resist the bends in its path. It simply moves, always forward, guided by conditions greater than itself. Trust feels like that river. It teaches you to stop grasping at certainty and instead flow with the unknown, knowing the current will carry you where you are meant to be. As you reflect, you notice how trust softens fear. Fear shrinks your world, insisting you control every outcome. Trust expands it, reminding you that not every answer is needed now. It allows you to live with openness, to welcome the mystery without demanding it reveal itself all at once. The Buddha's words echo, "To understand everything is to forgive everything." Trust is born of understanding that life's delays are not denials, that what seems like loss may be protection, and that even silence can be an answer. With this trust, even your unanswered questions feel lighter, no longer burdens but companions walking beside you until their time to unfold arrives. As night wraps around the monastery, the lanterns glow softly against the dark. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of pine and incense. You breathe deeply, and in that breath, you sense it. You are held, not by chance, not by chaos, but by something far greater. The simple, mysterious law of cause and effect, flowing endlessly, carrying you forward. and you realize you no longer need to resist it. You can trust the unfolding. There comes a moment when trust grows so deep that it no longer asks questions. It no longer bargains with life, demanding explanations or guarantees. Instead, it bows quietly, not in defeat, but in surrender. This surrender is not weakness, it is the highest form of strength. It is the strength to release control, to stop grasping at outcomes, and to rest in the mystery of existence. The Buddha taught, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." Surrender is the doorway to that peace. When you stop wrestling with what is, the mind loosens its grip, and suddenly the stillness you've been seeking reveals itself. Peace was never far away. It was only hidden beneath resistance. Imagine holding a rope in a game of tug-of-war. The harder you pull, the tighter the tension, the deeper the struggle. But the moment you let go, the rope falls, and the struggle dissolves into nothing. Life is much the same. We suffer not because of what is happening, but because of how tightly we cling to it. When you surrender, the weight you've been dragging suddenly feels lighter, as if it was never yours to carry. The monk sits beside you in the quiet hall and whispers, "Let go, not because you are giving up, but because you are finally choosing to live." His words ripple through you, soft but powerful. You realize that surrender is not about abandoning your path. It is about walking it without resistance. It is about moving with life instead of against it, trusting that even the unknown has its place. Think of the lotus once more. It does not fight the mud. It rises through it, nourished by the very darkness that surrounds it. Or imagine the hawk gliding effortlessly in the wind, not flapping wildly in fear, but opening its wings in full trust of the air beneath it. This is surrender, not passivity, but harmony, not escape, but alignment. As you breathe in, you feel the last threads of tension loosening, regrets about the past soften, worries about the future drift away. What remains is only now, this moment, this breath, this silence. And in this space, peace emerges like dawn breaking through the night. You understand now why the Buddha said, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment." For the present is where surrender blossoms and peace becomes real. The lantern light flickers gently, shadows dancing on ancient walls. The wind grows still, and in that stillness, your heart finally rests. You are no longer clinging, no longer resisting. You are simply here, and in being here fully and completely, you find the peace you have been seeking all along. Tonight, you have walked through rivers and mountains, through the silence of the monastery and the whisper of the lotus rising from the mud. You have seen how even the sharpest pains can become teachers, how even the darkest nights give birth to dawn. Slowly, gently, you have remembered what was always true, that nothing in your life has been wasted. Every step, every mistake, every heartbreak, every joy, it has all been part of the unfolding of your journey. The Buddha's words echo softly now. All things arise and pass away, but the wise who see this do not weep. You begin to see why. The moments you feared would break you have instead shaped you. The losses you thought you could never endure have deepened your compassion. The detours you resented have led you to hidden blessings. Everything, without exception, has carried you closer to understanding. Now, as your body sinks into rest, let the last threads of doubt dissolve. There is nothing more you need to fight against, nothing more you need to hold on to. Life has been carrying you all along, like a river guiding a leaf. Trust that it will continue to carry you even as you drift into sleep. Trust that you are exactly where you are meant to be. Breathe deeply and let gratitude soften your heart. Gratitude for the pain that made you wiser, for the joy that made you lighter, for the ordinary moments that made you whole. In this gratitude, peace arises naturally, quiet, unshakable, infinite. You are not separate from life's great web. You are a thread within it, woven with purpose, glowing with meaning. And as you drift into dreams, let this truth be your companion. Everything happens for a reason, not as punishment, not as a reward, but as part of the endless, compassionate unfolding of existence. Rest in that truth, rest in that peace, rest in the heart of the Dharma. If these teachings have touched something within you, something that longs for peace, for wisdom, for a deeper way of living, consider subscribing. It is more than a button to click. It is a way of saying yes to your own growth, yes to walking this path with intention. A small gesture, but one that helps us share this wisdom with more hearts like yours. Together we walk the journey, not alone, but as part of the same great unfolding. Thank you for being part of Buddhist journey. Sleep now, rest well, and awaken tomorrow with the quiet knowing that you are part of something timeless, something vast, something beautiful.